I've had lots of people request a demonstration of how I cut half-blind dovetails using the dovetail guide. So this is a 1 in 6 guide, which is my favourite angle and the one I'll be using for this demonstration. Now I've got the 2 pieces here, so marked with the red dots to show which piece goes with which is the top and which is the outside. So a very good marking method that. So half-blind dovetails are marked out slightly differently from through dovetails. So you take the pin board here and adjust this so that it's about, I normally go about 5/6 of the way along. Now traditionally people would say a third or a quarter, but I find these aren't particularly refined, and also people do tend to leave quite large fat pins on the side. This makes the chopping out easier, but I prefer the look of something which is a little bit more refined. So here we simply mark those along the end grain. Like that. And then we take the same setting and use that for the tailboard. So both sides. And then roll it round the corners. This is why I find a wheel marking gauge so useful for dovetails. Okay, and then the last mark we need to do is to adjust the guide to set the depth. And then we can mark that on the inside of the pin board. So that sets the parameters for the cuts. So first of all, we start with the tailboard. So I've marked along here, we're going to go for one there, one there, one in the middle, one in the middle of there, and one in the middle of there. So we take our saw, take the 1 in 6 guide, so you can see the cutting of the tails is exactly the same as with through dovetails. Turn it in the vise. So with all the cuts done, turn it round so that the face side's showing. Lower the seat. Okay, so with all the tails cut down to the line and cleaned out, it's time now to mark the pins. So we take our dovetail alignment board and take the pin board. So the inside of the board is facing here. Line that up, and then that allows us to freely and squarely mark up the pins. So bringing that flush to the rear and dead on the line that we've marked across the end grain, then we're able to mark out the pins. You need to be careful here, try not to go past the line, because that may leave you a fair amount of planing, which wouldn't be desirable if this was for a draw front. Okay, so there we have the pins marked out. Now it's time to cut them. Board's done its job. So with this in the vise, we used the guide this way around for the tails, and it's this way round for the pins. Now, what we're trying to do here is obviously the lap we don't need to be sawing into. And so we've got a pair of lines. We've got a line across the end grain and a line across the inside of the board. So we need to be sawing and reaching a stage where we touch both those lines but don't go past either one of them. So if we just edge that up, and then we're just looking to cut adjacent to the line. And we're trying to hit the two lines at the same time. And then on to the next one. And the next. And again, I'm just looking to saw adjacent to the line, not through it, and not too much to one side, just next to it. And at the same time hit the baseline as well as the lap line. So this time, whoops, let's get this right. So again, we just line that up. Now one of the things which is difficult here is that I can see the line for the lap, but I can't see the baseline. So I just need to take a little bit of care, leaning over to make sure I reach both at the same time. So again, adjacent to the line. Another alternative to leaning over would be to position a mirror there as well. Again. Trying to hit both lines at the same time. Okay. So there we've made the cuts as far as we can go. And so now we need to chop out the waste. So the first thing I like to do is to just, yeah, that's a good one, just about a couple of mil up from the line, just to start to identify things. And just work your way along. Don't go too far. And then if we put this in the vise, we can start to chop the waste out in the other direction. Now, because of the wedging action here, if we just put a wide chisel in there as we became nearer to the lap, then we'd start to bruise the corners. So I actually drop down to a 1/4 inch chisel here, and for the first part, comes out without any problem. And then for the second part, I like to cut it in 2 goes. So we create a slight V shape here. So one there, and one there. And so you can see, by doing this V shape, then we're relieving one side before we cut the other, so that then it's not putting pressure on the pins. So, having worked down that far, transfer to the wider chisel, and then and then we can revert back and do this, the V-shape cutting again. So one side and the other, the other, so now we're getting quite close to the line. Then we can look here to go 1 mil from the line, and then we can actually go into the gauge line. So tap and tilt slightly for an undercut. So with one baseline done, then we can carefully start to and this is where you need a little bit of care, because if you're looking at having fairly small pins and you've got a fairly small lap, then the closer you get to those, the more fragile they are. So this just needs to approach this with some care. So if we just edge that into the corner and then use the 6mm chisel just to start removing some of the waste. A skew chisel is quite useful, although I find the smaller chisels do the job quite well. So here we're looking to go into the gauge line, and again into the gauge line. And for cleaning up the corners, I like to use the 1/8 of an inch chisel just to get in. So there we go, a nicely cleaned out pin, and then we just repeat that for the others. So with all the pins cut and cleaned out, it's time to see how we did. So there we go. Using the 1-in-6 magnetic guide, half blind dovetails, made easy.